Welcome back to the show, The Unbroken. As always, I am your host, Sam Davis. It's a pleasure to be here. You know, last week we had David Elliott come in, the founder and owner of Burning Tree Programs in Texas. True individualized long-term care for the reluctant to recover. It is a place like no other. It's not built for everyone, but it's damn sure built for those that just can't get sober. And my guest today, of course, I was a patient in that program. I owe my life for the work that was done to me there. And I had a roommate of a guy named Brook that was there with me. He was just like me. He had come straight out of prison, right to Burning Tree. And now he's a CEO. So Brook's with me today, and we're going to let you know and talk a little bit about what was the experience like of being a Burning Tree client. Because I'll tell you, in the rooms of recovery and in the circles of behavioral health and anywhere where you're talking about treatment and it's known about treatment, when you mention Burning Tree, when people ask you, hey, where'd you sober up? Where'd you go to treatment? What'd you do? And you say Burning Tree, they're like, oh, really? Oh, really? Like it carries a level of respect. And so I just think it's important because I know there's a lot of families out there that are struggling and their loved ones in and out of treatment. And like, does a place exist for people that are reluctant to recover? And I can tell you, yes, it does. And this episode is brought to you by Burning Tree. And we're going to have a great conversation today. Brook, glad to have you up here, man. Brook McKenzie, CEO of Burning Tree. What's going on, man?
Hey, Sam, great to see you.
Yeah.
What an awesome thing to be doing today.
Yeah.
And thanks for the intro. I'm excited about what we're doing here today and who we might reach and who might hear some hope. So,
Right.
Really honored to get to do this with you.
Oh, dude, this is great. I mean, it's been a pleasure having y'all up and just hanging out and just,
Thank you.
as again, sitting out on the porch looking over the water, 3X crackheads going, how do we get here?
Yeah.
But you didn't see this coming.
I didn't see it
You
coming.
didn't see that you were going to be CEO of a treatment program, a world-renowned treatment program, highly respected treatment program. When you were little, that wasn't what you saw coming.
No.
What did Brook want to be when he was little?
I actually wanted to be a dentist when I was very young. I wanted
you
to
were
be
little?
a dentist. Yeah, I think pretty just ordinary, run-of-the-mill.
Right.
Raise a family, be a dentist. I mean, that was the track for me. Had a pretty good home life. Two great parents. They worked really hard, gave us a lot of values. Had a younger brother, and pretty traditional. And I think the pain for a lot of the families, probably a lot of the families that are listening now, that think, God, we raised our son, our daughter, with these morals, these values, these principles, and here she is, and here he is, and this is how they're showing up. And, that's part of my story. And that's part of the pain that I created, for the people that love me most. It wasn't, coming into treatment for the 5th or the 8th, or in my case, the 11th time to Burning Tree. It was a culmination of all the behaviors in and outside of addiction. And really the end stage of it was that I had become so untrustworthy by the people that loved me the most, trusted me the least, and my behaviors showed them that I was untrustworthy. I know that caused a lot of pain, and I know a lot of families that are listening right now, likely have some of those same sentiments, and it brings up a lot of pain and a lot of confusion about, where's this leading to, and is there any way out? Of course, you and I know that there is a way out.
Yeah, there most definitely is a way out.
Yeah. So
when was the first time you joined the ranks of the addicted?
Join the ranks of
Would
the
that
addicted.
start? How'd that start out?
I think like for a lot of us started very young. In fact, I remember a feeling that I had before I'd ever touched a substance. I'd never touched anything, alcohol, cigarettes, nothing. I think I was in 2nd grade, right? So what's 2nd grade? Is that about 8 years old, give
Something
or
like
take?
that, 7 or 8.
7 or 8
something
years
like that.
old. I'm in 2nd grade, and the teacher's looking out to the kids. It's the very beginning of the year, and she's letting everyone know. Her name was Miss Lepton, and she's letting everyone know, you can be anything you want to be when you grow up. You can be a fireman, a police officer, an attorney, a doctor, an astronaut. And I just remember that as she looked out at us, she wasn't talking to me. She was looking right through me, and I just wasn't included. And that's a feeling I had of being apart from, right? Not really fully belonging. And I'll tell you, to answer your question, the first time I touched a substance, it was alcohol. And it was with some friends, and it was at my parents' house, and we stole the alcohol from the liquor cabinet, which was locked. My parents weren't big drinkers, and we got in there and drank, and I mean, it was instant. I'm included. I'm a part of. I
So you
fit
remember,
in.
sorry to interrupt here, but you remember in second grade, you remember that day that teacher turned around
I remember
and said
that day. Yeah.
That was pretty impactful, because imagine all the pleasurable experiences you had in second grade, and all the trips to the playground, and all the treats and snacks. And I don't think nap time was a thing in second grade anymore, but of all the experiences of second grade, that's what stood out to you.
That stood out.
Do you think that's the moment that you made the agreement with yourself that she's not talking to me, like this I'm not good enough? Or do you think you had that feeling long before?
You know, I don't know, Sam. I think what I know today as a recovered man is I'm real clear that I had something spiritual going on from a very young age, right? And that there was a void in me. And when I used a chemical, alcohol or drugs, right, it changed the way that I felt. And I felt not a part of. I felt loneliness, right? I felt a sense of isolation from a young age. Now, when I drank or used a substance, that went away. And it gave me some relief, right? Now, we know it caused a lot of trouble and a lot of pain for myself and for a lot of people. But that really stands out to me. And I know today that was part of the spiritual problem that I think all addicts and alcoholics suffer from, right? Yeah. So...
what was the first thing that it was alcohol was the first thing you used?
You know, it was alcohol. You know, we got introduced to some marijuana, you know, and the first couple times I used marijuana, I said, well, this doesn't work.
Right.
But I think it was that third or fourth time it did, you know, and then what I remember is just, again, getting to be a part of with a group, with a small community of boys, and just, you know, feeling some sense of purpose, and it brought us together in a sense of brotherhood. So, you know, that's what stands out to me about that. Now, that quickly turned into some other substances, and, you know, for me...
At what age was this?
This was around 14. Yeah, 13 and 14,
common
give or take.
Age. Common age for
you
that.
know, experimenting with cigarettes, experimenting with, you know, tobacco products, you know, and things of that nature, probably around that age, you know, 13, 14. Yeah.
How'd it go from there? What'd life look like? You did do well,
you know,
in school? Was school well? College?
In terms of addiction, it never got better. I'll say that, right? Around the age of 15, I did get introduced to crack cocaine. Now, I didn't know it was crack cocaine. You know, I grew up in the piney woods of East Texas. You know, during that time, there was a campaign from the Reagans, and I think it was a Just Say No campaign from Nancy Reagan and Ronald Reagan. And that was really the extent of the education, was just say no. You know, all that to say, when I got introduced to crack, I didn't know what it was. We were in the countryside procuring from a bootlegger in a little, you know, country parcel, you know, probably some malt liquor. And we went up there and knocked on the door and procured that. And he let us know, hey, you know, if you want to visit my nephew next door, he's got something to put on your marijuana cigarettes. And so, you know, we got some. I was included in that. Yep, I was included in that party. And, you know, little did I know that was crack. And I mean, from that moment, you know, it got dark. I'll just say that. And that was at 15 years old. You know, by the time I was 18, I'd been to 3 treatment centers. And so that's 3 adolescent treatment centers.
So it got bad pretty quick.
It got bad very quick, right? Yeah. And it was, I remember we were going to go on a summer vacation. We went to Mexico each year, and my folks took us. And, you know, my brother went, of course. And, you know, I'd been stealing money from my family. Now, I'm 15. I'd been stealing money for drugs, in this case crack cocaine, from my family for about 4 or 5 months. And I don't mean a few $100. We're talking thousands of dollars. I had known how to get into a safe that was in the floor of my family's home, and I had stolen the money, and I had taken $100 at a time, then maybe $200, and, you know, over the course of 4, 5, 6 months, it was all gone. And I can tell you the amount of shame and guilt and horror that I felt.
Just waiting for the day that they
waiting
go
for the
save.
day, and then just the shame and the guilt of stealing from my family, and I was, again, a kid. I was a 15-year-old, and I was addicted. I didn't even know what was going on with me, really. I knew that what I was doing was definitely wrong, and I had a moral compass, but I was powerless. And I didn't know what powerless was back then, but I just knew at an animal level, hey, something's really, really wrong. I really don't know how to communicate this. I have a lot of fear. I'm stealing from my family. And, I just remember that my dad always took money out of the safe when we went to Mexico, right? And he would change it into pesos, and it was a whole process, and I'd been exposed to it for years. And so I knew he was going in that safe that night, the night before we left. And sure enough, I just remember him just yelling my mom's name. And she came downstairs, and I overheard them say, all the money's gone. And I just heard the murmurs about it's Denise. And Denise was, a nanny and a housekeeper and someone that was very dear to me and our family. And I just remember when I heard that, I ran upstairs, and I said it wasn't Denise. It was me. I'm addicted to drugs, and, and I need help, and I'm really scared. And that was the first time I went to treatment. And,
what was their reaction? Like,
shock.
Holy shit, or what?
They didn't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't know what to do.
Terrified.
Sure. They knew an addiction psychiatrist in Tyler named Dr. Knowles. God rest his soul. And, we went to see him. He recommended a place in East Texas called Sundown Ranch. And I went there. Of course, I went there twice within just several months. And, ultimately went to another treatment center not too much longer in Iowa. And, all for naught. I would typically relapse within, definitely within a week, usually within a couple of days. And that was a pattern that repeated itself into adulthood. There weren't periods of 6 months of sobriety or 2 months. They were typically a couple days, and in some rare cases, 2 or 3 weeks. And I don't even know if there was rarely a month, in conjunction. Just a series of relapses and the consequences, the shame, the guilt, the confusion. It just grew and grew and grew. So, yeah.
So it was 11 treatment centers total.
11 treatments total before Burning Tree. Yeah, Burning Tree was the final treatment episode.
So after several treatment centers, I'm sure in your mind, I was like, well, this shit doesn't work. Right? So there's got to be other ways that I can do an about face with my life. So what other attempts did you make, if any?
I don't know if I thought
rewrite the ship.
I don't even know if I was sharp enough to come to the conclusion, like, this stuff doesn't work. These treatments don't work. I think for me, and I think a lot of us, whether we're in treatment, about to go to treatment, just completed treatment, it's this concept or this idea that, like, it's going to be different this time. Like, I'm done. I've sworn off. And if I do anything, I'm just going to drink. If I do anything, I won't do it for a few months. And, a sense that, like, I'm in control, right? Or that the consequences were so much that, like, this time it's going to be different, or we've somehow evolved or become enlightened, or the treatment was good. I did some work, and, like, everything's better now. And nothing could be further from the truth.
Right.
Because the reality is that what I was experiencing, and I didn't have a way to put this into words for, almost 20 years, since an adolescent, I got sober, give or take around 35. I didn't know what powerlessness was. I didn't know that I was using and relapsing again and again against my will. Against my will. Think about that.
Yeah.
The guilt, the shame. I wasn't lying when I said, I'm never going to do this again. I won't steal from you again. I don't want to hurt you again. Those weren't lies. I believed that, right? And then the moment came, like it always did, where the mental obsession came, okay, I'll only do a little. No one's going to know. It's going to be different this time. I'll be back by 10 p.m., right? Yeah. Just a 20.
Yeah.
And that's the lie. And what I know today is in those moments, it wasn't that I was thinking that made me insane or powerless. It was that I actually believed it.
Yeah.
if you had hooked me up to a lie detector test and said, okay, are you sure you're going to be back by 10 p.m. and you're only going to do a little, I actually would have passed the test convincingly.
Yes.
That's what insanity is.
Yeah. If I would have gone to the front door and there'd have been the polygraph and said, all right, so you're exactly right. I love the way you put that.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, so you're telling me that you're going to just smoke $20 worth of crack cocaine. I'd be like, yeah, that needle wouldn't have moved. Not a bit. I'd pass with flying colors.
Yeah.
Because we believe, and that's the insanity.
That's the insanity.
And that is where a lot of families burn a lot of energy for many years, is waiting for their loved one to snap out of the insanity, to wait and trying to make sense out of nonsense. Yeah. If they can just wrap their head around the simple fact that, hey, right now, your loved one is insane.
Yeah. And I think for me, we as a family tried to point to things that are very real and can be very concerning for a lot of families, including my own. He's got anxiety. He's got depression. We're wondering if there's bipolar disorder. Can we get him on a medication? Can he go see this clinician? And trying all these different interventions, but failing to recognize that really what was going on with me was something much, much bigger than that, right? Yeah. It wasn't that I had this big drug problem. It was that I had this huge, overwhelming spiritual problem, right? And I was seeking to rectify that from a very young age, even from the time where that teacher looked at me, and I just wasn't included in the class and in the hopes and aspirations that she shared for the rest of the young kids. So, and none of us knew that. And I kind of, along the way and through the years, as I've got to work with just hundreds of families, oftentimes that gets propositioned to me about the anxiety and the depression and some other things. And like what I've come to learn from my own experience, this is from my own experience, is that, even right now, there's just millions of people today that are seriously debilitated by anxiety disorders, depressive disorders. I mean, they are debilitated, but you know what they're doing? They're not doing what I was doing, stealing from their family, right?
Right.
Disappearing for 10, 12, 15 days at a time, getting arrested. In fact, what they're doing is they're struggling with these very serious disorders. They're seeking help. They may be seeing a qualified clinician. They're getting the kids to school. They're finishing their degree. They're, resuming their career, whatever it is. And so what I've come to find is that the big bad wolf in my life, of course these other things were going on, was addiction.
Yeah.
And a spiritual problem. Because the reality is, a spiritually fit me, a spiritually fit you, Sam, there's no world in which you're smoking crack spiritually fit.
Doesn't exist.
They're not congruent. They can never go together. It's not even a possibility. Right. You can't point to one person in your life that you've known from your childhood or otherwise where you can point to that person and say, you know what, that person's spiritually whole, in communion with their Creator. I can see it. I can see it in every aspect of their being, and then at the same time, picture them snorting meth, smoking crack, doing heroin or fentanyl. You'll never see it.
I've got an example of that, and I'm glad you brought it up too. I love the way you're like explaining things. It's just, everybody will get it. I was a crackhead. I had a spiritual malady, spiritually bankrupt. Mm-hmm. Like my soul, my being. That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about spiritual. It's just our inside, our eternal condition. Garbage, like a dumpster fire. I was a crackhead. My oldest son, being raised by two addicted parents, debilitating anxiety and depression. But he didn't have that internal condition. Mm-hmm. He got so anxious at 21 years old that he didn't even want to leave the house to go to work. He was terrified that he couldn't trust anybody, no one in a relationship. It was horrible. He was ready to lose his relationship. And he went out and got some trauma work done. But he drank, smoked a little weed, drank. He's not an alcoholic. I was terrified that he was going to be, or that both my kids were going to be, based on the how they grew up. But he went and got some trauma work done. He's leaving for Japan, him and his buddy, tomorrow, just going off to Japan, just the two of them. Like his life has been completely transformed as a result of doing the internal work of some trauma work. And he still drinks.
Yeah.
He'll hit a bong every night. He doesn't have what I had.
Yeah.
He doesn't. So thank you for that. Appreciate
Well,
it.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of confusion. I mean, parents especially, is my son, is my daughter an addict or an alcoholic? Or, maybe from time to time there's a big consequence. It could be, he got arrested for a DUI, or, hey, dropped out of college again. And, those things in and of themselves don't qualify a person to be an alcoholic or an addict, right? A lot of folks, given sufficient reason, they stop or moderate their drinking or using altogether. But then there's a class like me, and there's a class like what I believe to be yourself, where despite the consequences, right, we continue to use, and I'll say against our will, having made a firm resolution, having sworn off after the 8th treatment or the 10th treatment, I'm just not going to do this anymore. You can count on that. And I believe it, and I'm convicted. And oftentimes my family would believe it too, because I was telling the truth.
Right.
And then a day later, a week later.
And then they ask you, what happened?
What happened?
Why did you do this? How could you do that? What's going on? And then we get defensive because we no more have the answers than they do. We don't know. I'm just as perplexed as you all are. I don't know. God, damn if I know. All I know is I woke up in a tobacco field naked with my underwear in the dashboard of the truck wondering how I got there. That's all I know.
Wow.
I don't know anything other than that. I don't know why.
Wow.
Can't tell you. And then I'm so full of shame and I'm embarrassed by it that when you talk to me about it, I'm going to get really defensive. I'm going to deflect, and I'm going to make it your fault.
Yeah.
Because it's got to be your fault. Like there's the only way that I can justify this ridiculous behavior that I continue to do is that it's got to be someone else's fault.
Yeah.
It can't continue to have been me doing it. It has to have been done to me. So we play a victim really well too.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to get off on that.
We do play victims really well. And the one thing I've really learned, and Burning Tree helped me understand this, is, if you're going to be a really, really good victim, guess what you got to have?
Oh, you got a big bad villain.
Got to have a villain, or the story doesn't come off, right? So
it's kind of weird if you don't have a villain.
Got to have a villain.
Yeah.
So
it was great for that. So look, I really want to get into. I'm so excited to get and talk about our experiences at that program because it's unique. I mean, it is the Navy SEALs of treatment centers. I'll say that, and that's, it's the Navy SEALs of treatment centers. So you went to several treatment centers, wanting desperately to be different than who you are, right?
Yeah.
What were those other treatment centers like? Like, what was the model mostly? Yeah. What did it do?
I think they were largely the same, and I think these treatment centers, I went to 11 and then Burning Tree, had a lot of good people in them. And each time I went, at least to my recollection, I went wanting to change, wanting something different. I didn't want certainly the consequences that I was experiencing, but I didn't want to harm my family. I didn't want to create this distress, but I literally could not stop relapsing. I was very chronic from a young age. But what I remember about these treatment centers, great people worked with them, right? I feel like the majority of the people that worked for the programs I attended believed in what they were doing, right? I believe that largely they were ethical and moral. At least that was my experience. But I don't think they got to the depth and the weight, right? I don't think they ever got to know who I was. They never had an opportunity to observe the behaviors, real focus on the behaviors that were occurring and evolving in me that always led to more and more relapse, right? How much can you really get to know a treatment program, even if you're there for 60 days or 90 days even? Typical 90-day treatment, you're going to have, on average, as few as 8 to 9, as many as 11 to 12 one-on-one sessions with a licensed counselor. If you've been getting sick for 5 years, 10 years, 15 or 20 years, how are we going to unpack all of that and get into some real dynamic solutions in a short 30, 60, 90-day window? I just don't see it happening.
Yeah. My buddy Jason, sorry to interrupt. My buddy Jason Chain talks about that, they're running people through expecting to get the foundation complete on someone. And then, you got 28 days to do it or 60 days to do it. No matter if it's done or not, you're going to put the floor on and the walls and the roof on a foundation that isn't complete.
Yeah.
So people go out, they can't withstand the storm, they can't withstand the wind, they can't withstand the pressure, and the house crumbles down around them. Because the foundation, and that's what I think so crucial about Burning Tree is like we had time and they had the talent and just the model, just the recipe of every single thing that went on in there.
Well,
Just
think about
really
this.
brought that foundation together.
What we experienced mutually, and I don't even know if we knew it at that time, 15 years ago, was we were experiencing a progress-based model of care. Now, in 99 and prior to that, and to my knowledge, I don't know if there are any other programs that are progress-based. I don't know of them. But Burning Tree is a progress-based model. I had always been in a time-based model. You started treatment on this day and you ended on this day. Now, that end day could vary by a couple days. It may even vary by a week or two, right? But it wasn't based on progress. It was based on insurance authorizations or just the time-based model that was there. 30, 60, 90 days are the most traditional ones. And Burning Tree's different from any other treatment program in the nation because it's only based and purely based on the individual's progress.
It's more in line with like how people treat other potentially fatal illnesses. Is that
That's right.
If I go in for cancer treatment, which I never have to do, or any of my loved ones have to, that doctor is not going to say, okay, well, you came into my office on June 20th. You're going to be doing cancer treatments until October of 26.
Right.
October 13th of 26.
Right.
That's and then you're done. Like I can't go into an ER with a kidney stone and they tell me exactly when the day is that I'm going to pass that kidney stone.
No.
It just, when I rolled in it, and we'll get into this, but yeah, the progress base with no discharge date, genius, common sense, and when you look at it, it's how it should be done. And I realize that it can't always be done that way with every person.
And I think it sounds good to most families, right? Especially if they've been to 3, 4, certainly getting into 5, 6 treatments or more. But you know what the main concern or the main fear or apprehension is for a family member when they look at a model like Burning Tree, which is authentic long-term care, is the fear that he's not going to go.
Yeah.
She won't go. Or if by some miracle they go, they're not going to stay.
Yeah.
And I know you help a lot of families with that,
Yeah.
To move past that and to realize and to recognize and to take inventory, really of what their power is.
Right.
And their authority is in the dynamic to like move the individual towards a commitment. And so, that's the experience of probably most of us. I think you were leveraged into treatment through
I didn't want
an
to
intervention.
Go. I didn't want to go. I wanted something different, but I didn't want to go.
And so was I.
Yeah, I mean, look, it was a long time ago when we were there together, right? That was a long time ago.
15 years, yeah.
A lot of things happened. I probably remember more in that year span of being in treatment, of experiences during that year combined, than I do of any other year of my life.
I could say the same.
So but I don't remember. I remember you coming, and I don't know why, I just remember you coming, you had a white shirt on. Is the best I remember. When I think of Brooke back in 2009, that was how I met you. How'd you get in there? What'd your road look like getting in? You went to multiple treatment centers, and, how'd you end up in Burning? And did you know where you were headed? I didn't.
I don't think I had a lot of clarity. I'll say that right out of the gate. I think if I knew anything, I knew that it was really bad. And I'm talking about my addiction and the impending consequences. Going into Burning Tree, it already had a series of consequences, like a lot of us. And it's not the average story for a Burning Tree client to have, been incarcerated, right? That's somewhat rare. But it was my story. And so I had been released from prison, and I had done quite a series of years in prison. And just so the audience knows, I was in prison for basic possession charges and very low-level stuff, maybe some forgery and some things like that. And, I certainly wasn't a mastermind criminal. I was a very, low-level drug addict that was, really powerless and trying to get more drugs somehow. And,
you weren't striving to be mafioso.
No, I was not
as the wonderful founder.
By no stretch of the
right?
imagination was I a criminal mastermind. No, definitely not. I cannot claim that. However, my behavior as such, was harmful to the communities. You just can't steal from people,
right.
Or certainly during that time possess drugs and think that you're going to avoid or evade consequences. There's consequences for that behavior. I'm grateful for those consequences today. The reality was I was so out of control and so powerless that my community needed to say, hey, we need to keep the community safe from you. And, it's certainly not okay for you to be stealing, whether from your family or anyone in your community. And they did what communities do. They removed me. And that said, I was coming out of that environment after some years, and like so many times before, thought coming out and returning to the Dallas-Fort Worth area that I was going to be okay. I had, quote, learned my lesson. I was obviously very remorseful and regretful about my behavior, and I did want something different. And I was going to go and work for the family, and it was just going to be a completely new era. Now, the reality is it sounded good. Everyone was convinced of it. I think even my family, despite the pain and the horror, of 15, 20 years of addiction, thought, this is going to be different. I think I made it, I'm going to give myself the longest term ever, maybe a month, 3 weeks to a month. And there I went. And it happened like it always happened. No one's going to know. I'm just going to get I just need a little relief. I won't let this get out of hand. Pass the lie detector test, off on a bender, right? So through a series of relapses over that 9 months, I wound up in an intervention in Dallas at the intersection, if people are familiar with Dallas, of Northwest Highway and Preston Road, and I was given a few options.
You were at an intersection.
At an intersection in a GMC truck with 2 interventionists and licensed therapists that were giving me my options for treatment. Burning Tree wasn't one of them. Okay? They had given me option A, B, and the Salvation Army. And they were all 30, 60-day programs, short-term programs that were being proffered by my family and by the 2 interventionists. And I had known someone in the weeks previous that had relapsed in a sober living I was living in, and he went to Burning Tree, I'd found out. But I didn't look into what Burning Tree was. I didn't know anything about it. Just in that moment, I knew that I'd had this acquaintance that I'd met in the sober living, and I thought, well, it'd be nice to go where he is. At least I'll have a pal. And it was pretty much so. I
that
mentioned,
was God, my friend.
I mentioned, how about Burning Tree? And I remember those 2 guys. I didn't know it at the time.
2 interventionists.
They looked at it like, this guy is an idiot. Well, the next morning, there I was at Burning Tree. And, and that was the start, of a whole new era and a whole new life. But that's a little history and story behind how that came to be.
As I can tell you, man, as an interventionist who has placed people in Burning Tree before, and like you were for you to just out and say, what about Burning Tree? Mm-hmm. When they're giving you options of 30, 60 days, and you say, what about it? Yeah. Like, to be an interventionist and have a client to just say that, I would have jumped up and down for joy. Yeah.
It does happen a couple times a year, maybe, someone willingly comes to Burning Tree, but most of us, that's not how it happens. Right. Yeah. And, I'd want any families to hear that and to know that, like, most of us, I would say 95% at a minimum, come through the love, nurturing, and leverage, right? Mm-hmm. Of a loving family system, where really we're providing no real meaningful opportunity other than to accept the terms we're offering, which is long-term treatment at Burning Tree. That's how 95% come to us. They don't really know how to bring that about. People like you know how to help them with that, and other great caring clinicians and interventionists. So that's how they get to us. How
long did it take you to be settled into Burning Tree before you realized, like, this is different? I know for me it was like second day. Second day I was there, I was like, this is different.
Immediately. I mean, everything, I don't know if I knew this then, but looking back, everything was run with just a standard of excellence, right? The staff were expected to perform at the same level of excellence as the clients were. Yeah. And, this is a big thing because, and I talk about this a lot, the reality is that when I came into Burning Tree and a series of other treatments prior to that, and I think a lot of your families will really relate to this, the expectations for me, the addict, the alcoholic, were like below the floor.
Yeah.
They had gotten lower and lower month to month, year to year, to where the families celebrated or thought it was a victory if I stayed and completed the treatment term for 30 days or didn't seem to send a mean letter home or, answered my phone 2 times in a row. That's where the standards were.
Yeah.
They were low, right? And really, what was being communicated to me through those low standards held by those around me was like, hey, we just don't believe you're capable of much.
Yeah.
And that wasn't to be hurtful or harmful or to hold me back.
It was based on their experiences.
It's
they've
based
been
on their
having with you.
experience, right?
Yeah.
But the reality is that our clients are capable of awesomeness, right? And Burning Tree was the first introduction to hey, we have actually an expectation of you. And like, we believe that you can do the things we're asking you to do, right? And we say it all the time, the brook that showed up at Burning Tree, the sand that showed up to Burning Tree probably couldn't do Burning Tree. But along the way, right, the me that could did show up. And that's the experience of pretty much all of our clients, is the person on day 1, day 2, yeah, they probably can't do Burning Tree. But along the way, they do show up. And that one that shows up is the one that our families, the siblings, the loved ones back at home, they're dying to see that person.
Yeah.
They're dying to meet that young man again, right? Or that daughter again, right? And I think that's what I'm so proud of today in my role with Burning Tree, is to get to be a part of that for other families. It's really cool.
Yeah. I noticed, and again, this is, talking a decade and a half ago when we were there, right? I mean, I don't remember every single day, but what was immediate to me is that, just as you were saying, is like they had expectations of me at Burning Tree. Like, we're not willing to sit here and settle that this is the best you've got. Mm-hmm. And we're really not going to give you a lot of time to lay around and get your shit together to get in gear. I think I had, because I came in late at night, they let me sleep in the bunk or the bed, and I went to detox the next day, and I was there for a week and came back. Mm-hmm. I had that afternoon when I came back from detox to kind of just get my wits about me, just to settle in, to get a tour of the show, where this is, where that is, how things work. Next day, I was expected to be in group early in the morning. I was expected to show up. I was expected to be there on time. And I think that's how it should be.
Yeah.
Because we're built for greatness, man. I
Absolutely.
truly believe that. I've never met a dumb, addicted individual, and I believe that, I believe God created us to be addicted individuals to keep us from taking over the world.
Yeah.
Because we're that damn talented. He had to have something to slow us down, Yeah. And I thank God that, because I've been to programs, I've been around clinicians where they kind of coddled me and were like, and I'm not blaming them. Like, I fed into it. I was like, oh yeah, you're right. I'm helpless. But they treated me like a delicate flower. Mm-hmm. Burning Tree did not. But they were not abusive. They told me they cared enough about me to tell me the truth about myself in a kind and loving way, but direct, to where I could hear it.
Right.
Because they know that out there on the street, the people that we give respect to are the people that are direct with us, the plugs, our compadres. When we're out there running and gunning, they didn't treat us like a delicate flower. They shot us straight, and they shot us straight in Burning Tree.
Yeah. I think one of the things that's made Burning Tree so successful is just that, Sam, is that, our experience at Burning Tree is that we care more about the person's life and their recovery than we do about their feelings. Yeah. Because the reality is, if I'm facilitating a group or having a one-on-one in my office with a client, if I'm wrapped up in that person's feelings and what they're going to feel, I'm not going to be able to tell them the truth.
Right.
And how is that going to serve them?
Yeah.
Right. And most treatment centers, whether their intentions are good or not, they've got just 30 days, 60 days. I don't know if they always get to the truth, right?
I think it's very difficult for them to look in those deep, dark corners, and damn near impossible for looking those deep, dark corners in the attics of our soul to unpack what needs to be unpacked in that amount of time. Plus, even if you tell me that I'm going away for 90 days, I don't care what they're unpacking. I know that I'm going to be out of there in 90 days. I'll be the most compliant person that maybe not the most compliant, but I mean, I'll show up.
Yeah.
But
it's really hard to hold your breath for 60, 90, and then you get beyond that amount of days and weeks to hold your breath. Like, the real me showed up at Burning Tree.
Yeah.
Because all the behaviors that had led me into a 3rd treatment, a 5th treatment, a 10th treatment, an 11th treatment, and all the other consequences all played out at Burning Tree, right? And there was the time and opportunity and the accountability for those behaviors, those belief systems, those attitudes to actually be addressed and confronted in real time. And I needed that.
Yeah.
Because like you mentioned earlier, I lived in delusion. I couldn't see the truth, right? And I needed a lot of help to unpack those things. So.
Yeah, I remember vividly that I remember telling my mom on the 5-minute phone call. I said, I'm about ready to drop my fifth step. After the fifth step, I'm coming home. I'm leaving. And I just, you couldn't, again, hook me to the lie detector test. I'd have passed it. Couldn't have convinced me that that was not a good idea.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to have a burning bush experience on the fifth step.
Yeah.
I've gotten the resentments out of the way. I'll be ready to go.
Yeah.
I wasn't ready to go.
No, not even close.
I wasn't ready to go. You know, every other program I went to, you took drugs and alcohol out of my system.
Yeah.
The next thing I wanted was a female
Yeah.
in treatment to make me, to change the way I feel, to fill me. And,
Well, I think a lot of us in treatment, you know, you're in another 30, 60, 90-day treatment program, or at least my experience was that I wanted the benefit of the things that I hadn't earned. So I'm in a treatment program. Here's my fourth treatment program. It's 30 days. And, you know, I want you, mom and dad, or whoever the key players are, to do this for me when I get out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I went to treatment. I did my part. Now I want, right? A lot of treatment programs actually co-sign that.
Yeah.
Right? Burning Tree didn't.
No.
Burning Tree was the first place I went where they were going to allow me to have the dignity to stand on my own 2 feet when it was time to transition into aftercare, right? Have a job, right? Get my own car insurance, right? Pay the bills, do my own grocery shopping, and no help from mom and dad, right? I mean, I was a 30-something-year-old male. And I'll tell you, before that, I would have always found a way, and the treatment center would have been complicit in it and enrolling them to support me, which just, for me, just sends another message of like, we don't believe you're capable of doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which couldn't be further from the truth. I was very capable, just like you.
Yeah. Now,
Just
you
like
and
all
I,
of our clients.
You and I had different experiences down the road of Burning Tree. Is that, you know, you went all the way through the aftercare. You went through the entire program, right? I did not. I'm just, you know, admit to everyone. I left Burning Tree against staff advice 2 weeks shy of a year.
2 weeks shy of a year.
2 weeks shy of a year.
I remember the day.
Yeah.
I was there.
Yeah. And they did everything that they were supposed to do. My family was so coached up and so willing to allow me to have the experiences that I needed to have and to get out of my way with the work that they did with my family and the time that my family, not just what Burning Tree did with my family, but the time that I was away from them, they were doing their own work without the distractions of my nonsense and chaos, and they had become solid, and they were not going to enable my return. It was up to me. Yeah. I had to make it work. I was 1,500 miles away from home.
Yeah, I don't think you got a red carpet rolled out for you when you walked off campus of Burning Tree.
I walked off campus with my with a trash bag full of clothes, walking. Yeah. Like I didn't, you know, they were not going to enable my demise.
Wow.
Now God had different plans for me. By every stretch of the imagination, I should not have probably stayed sober because the statistics show that people that leave programming early against staff advice don't do well.
Mm-hmm. It's true. So
I don't recommend it at all, but it was the experience that I had. But it was like, it's hard for me to really put into words of the things that Burning Tree, the way that was designed, like every single thing. I understood even when I hated it. I mean, let's just be real. Some of the stuff in there, I hated it.
Absolutely.
Every day I wanted to be somewhere else.
Well, what's the thing that we hate the most as addicts in early recovery or pre-recovery? I mean, I don't know if it's the same for you, but we don't like accountability.
Structure.
Right? I want to do what I want to do with the least possible consequences, or none at all, preferably. And Burning Tree is the antithesis to that. It is about personal responsibility and accountability. And like the greatest gift I think it gave me was today I just get to be responsible for my own feelings, for my own choices, and the consequence or the benefits of those, right? And prior to that, it was always, I wanted to keep everyone caught in this cycle, right, of you're responsible for that, or this finger gets pointed over here or over there. And, you know, for a long time, I had my family bought into that, right, which perpetuated the cycle, because I could always enroll them up until Burning Tree in this cycle of, here's this crisis, right? It's a relapse or whatever it is, but it's a big crisis. But the crisis, mom, is for you to solve. Or the crisis, dad, is for you to solve, right? My relapse or my behavior. But it doesn't work unless I sprinkle in a couple ingredients. And I really perfected this: fear and guilt. I want you to feel guilty about something. It could be from my childhood. It could be for something recent. And I want you to feel fear. Fear that if you don't fix this or correct this or help me with this or solve this problem, something bad's going to happen and it's going to be on you. And that happened for about almost 20 years. The cycle of crisis, fear, and guilt, right? There's no more crisis today that I have. There's problems, but they're my problems. They're mine to solve, right? That's probably one of the other greatest gifts that Burning Tree offered me, a sense of personal responsibility. This is mine to solve, right? These are my feelings to have. And a lot of families today, just like my family, really had a sense of like, oh, Brooke, we can't trust you with your feelings because if you get mad or if you get lonely or if you get sad, you're going to relapse. So there was all these behaviors from family members to try to change or control the way that I felt, which looked like walking on eggshells, cleaning up messes, to keep me from going on another relapse. As you know, that doesn't work. But that was part of that cycle of crisis, fear, and guilt. So I know you're familiar with it.
When I was there, even though I would have rather have been somewhere else, like I understood why they did what they did. It was a microcosm of the world. And there's no possible way on this planet that if I couldn't follow the order and the structure and the rules of the land of Burning Tree in that microcosm of the world, there was no possible way that I could follow directions or obey the rules out here in the free world. That's all it was. And look, we're notoriously late. Always. And that's selfish. That's selfish and self-centered. We're thinking about ourselves. Inconsiderate. We're not worried about anybody. Late. I'll get there when I get there. At Burning Tree, what they did repeatedly over and over is that if you had a group at 12 o'clock, you got to be sitting in a seat 11:55.
That's right.
Y'all still do that too?
We absolutely still do that. Yeah. I mean, I can't remember a time in the past 15 years where I've been late to anything. I learned that at Burning Tree, right? I learned that growing up, but along the way in the addiction, right, and the behaviors therein, lost sight of that and neglected that. And that was taught to me again. And we do that today. It's a very, very important lesson.
And this is a good point you make. It's like I was taught that early on in life. I dropped it through the addiction. Burning Tree brought it back up for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Burning Tree, it's kind of funny, and I know you know this, arguably one of the most prominent names, right, in this field. But the reality is there's a lot of misconceptions about it, right? And, one that may be accurate is it is a place for hopeless cases. That is how Burning Tree is thought of. Like, hey, the family's really, really hopeless. They've tried a lot. They've tried everything. This case is it's a really sad case. It's a really scary case. You really need to go to Burning Tree, right? So people make up what they make up about that. But the reality that you and I know is like Burning Tree's also a lot of fun. I mean, some of my best memories and most hilarious belly laughs and just connections on a human level with peers and friends that I have to this day that I could walk over to my phone and pick up and call and we could get on speakerphone and just laugh for 30 minutes nonstop. I mean, people don't always see that side of Burning Tree, right? They see it as like it's the big bad wolf. It's long term. It's for the hopeless cases, the chronic relapsers, and all that's true. Like we have a rocking good time, and like our clients get to develop friendships and connections that will last them a lifetime, right? And they get to experience so much together. And, that's often, overlooked, I think.
Yeah.
And, that's something that you and I definitely experience.
Oh, yeah,
the laughter
man.
And the fun. And
Oh, yeah. I'm talking belly laughs that I hadn't had in
pillow
years.
Talk.
Yeah. Yep. But we were doing the work. We supported each other. I got to experience what recovery feels like.
That's right.
While I was in treatment.
Yeah.
And that is very, very rare. It gave me the gift of time and the work and the true message of recovery, true, pure message.
And I know that Burning Tree and David Elliott would never take credit for this, and I don't take credit for it today as an employee for any of our clients and their experiences. But, one of the things I think we both got to learn and experience was this real authentic ability, like with your folks, just like with my folks, to be able to come to them and other persons I had harmed through my behaviors in and outside of addiction, and be able to frankly and humbly sit down with them and look them in the eye and say, you know what, how I've showed up in your life and the things that I've done, they've been wrong, flat out wrong. And be able to itemize and list those out and just let them know that, like, under no circumstance did you deserve any of this. And if this had been done to me, I may have felt this, that, and the other way. And just to not make any assumptions about how it impacted or affected them, but to create an open forum for them to share their experience, right? And for me to get to listen to that and embrace that and hear what their experience was, and to learn more about what I left out. And I'll tell you, my experience with my dad and an amends that I made with him, I had listed out a lot of things. I mean, I had stolen from my dad. I had lied to my dad. I'd really caused a lot of emotional, spiritual harm to my dad, through these behaviors and the fear and really the trauma of addiction. And, I'd went to him in this way. And when we got to the part where I'd asked him what I'd left out or what he wanted to share with me, that I wanted to hear it and understand it better, what he revealed to me was that, hey, I forgive you for all of those things. And like, you've asked me, what you may have left out. And he goes, I do want to share one thing with you. He said there was a time that you were out in Southern California, and you had been using, you had left the treatment center you were in. And I think you had been missing for several months, and we hadn't heard from you. And he said, one night you called me at 2 a.m. in Texas, and I answered the phone not knowing who it was, and it was you, and you just said, Dad, I love you, and I'm sorry. And he said, and then you hung up on me. And he goes, we didn't hear from you for weeks after that. And he goes, I thought you had died. And he goes, that's the thing that's hurt me the most and scared me the most. And I didn't even know that.
We're not even thinking about that.
No.
Not even thinking about that. An impactful event that happened to me is, like I say, you take drugs and alcohol out of my system. Next thing I want is the opposite sex to change the way I feel. Mm-hmm. I hooked up with a girl. It was my pattern going to treatment. Burning Tree saw that coming. They did. They expected it and saw it coming.
Oh yeah.
And typically when that's happening, I've gotten caught in treatment with that before. They don't tell the rest of the clients. They don't. It's just kind of a thing, and y'all separate. Oh man, they brought the clients because that girl that I'd hooked up with she had friends in there that were concerned about her.
That's right.
That wanted to see her do well. I had guys that were friends with me in there that wanted to see me do well, that were affected. When they allowed the community to say, not in a net, they weren't shaming me. It was like, hey man, I want you to know that your behavior impacted me. Your behavior affected me.
Yeah.
Like, that was a very selfish thing that you did, Sam, was because you endangered that girl's life. And they were telling her the same thing. Hey, it was a dangerous thing you did. It was you very selfish. You endangered his life. You were taking someone out of treatment. You were distracting someone who out of treatment.
Right.
Like we were a community. And I'm going to tell you that this experience of both you and David being up here in Virginia, and I hadn't seen you in a couple of years face to face. I mean, on social media, and we've talked and stuff, but face to face. And Mr. Elliott, I hadn't seen him since I left treatment, or before I left treatment. And when we were sitting out on that porch, and I know he wasn't a client of Burning Tree, but he developed it.
He did.
And when we were sitting out on that porch yesterday, I'm not even want to think that our lives compare the Navy SEALs or someone who's put their life on the line on the front lines of battle for their country and sacrificing. And that's not where I'm going. But I can tell, and when those guys come back from combat years later, doesn't matter how long it's been, when they reunite, they're like, it's like a brotherhood. It's a feeling. It's a brotherhood. Mm-hmm. I know the fellowship and all that. That's a brotherhood and a sisterhood. I get that. This is different.
Yeah.
I experienced with you all on the porch the other night something, a tie that bonded me to the both of you that was different than any other couple of folks I've ever had in the patio or on the porch. Wow. It's a brotherhood.
Yeah.
I was so grateful last night to have experienced that and to have had that in my life. And man, Burning Tree taught me how to be a man, how to grow up, and it taught my female friends that were in there how to be women.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so, so grateful for it. And when I found out that you were CEO, I'm like, there couldn't be a better person.
Wow,
and like where we came from, my friend, where we came from and how we showed up 15 years ago to where we are today blows my mind.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense.
You know, there's a step 2 thing that my sponsor asked me at Burning Tree. And I think for right now, it's resonating with me with what you just shared. He just looked me in the eye when we got to step 2 and he goes, do you believe that it's possible, even remotely possible, that what worked for me could work for you too? And I just remember saying, yes, I believe it's possible. And I know there's families out there that don't know if they believe it's possible. They don't know right now. They don't know anymore, right? But it is.
And I will say that every experience I had in every treatment center that I went to and came right back out and smoked cracked or went to the methadone clinic or just whatever, just messed around, I had experiences. They were not for naught. No. Every facility I went to, I needed every one of those experiences that I had to get where I am today, and you as well.
Absolutely. Everyone.
Yeah. Brooke, man, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Sam.
This has been a great episode for me to do, and I'm honored to do it. That's it for us today, y'all. Thanks for showing up and hearing us out. And again, this episode was brought to you by Burning Tree Programs, a true, individualized, long-term treatment program for the reluctant to recover. If you like what we said today, hit that like and subscribe. Always be good to yourselves. And if you've got a loved one that has been to multiple treatment centers and you don't think there is any way in hell that they'll ever sober up, give those guys a call. Thank you. Y'all be good to yourselves. That's it.